Hey everyone, and welcome to another recording of Our Human Experience, the podcast where we probe individuals to share the stories that made them who they are today.
And try to find the connection that is our human experience. And we are recording today in beautiful Govinda at the Arts Nexus podcast studio. I'm Claire Tierney.
And I'm Anna Winter.
Where can they follow us, Anna?
They can follow us on social media at Our Human Experience on Instagram and Facebook.
ourhumanexperience.com.au. We invite you
to pod binge
Our Human Experience
anytime you like.
Hello, Anna. We've got Anna Winter here, who is the co-host of Our Human Experience. And I'm really excited to spend a bit of time with you today, Anna, to find out a little bit more about you. You spend a lot of time talking to others and finding out their human experience and what's been their journey. So we get to hear a bit about you today. You good to go for that?
I'm ready.
Well, as you ask everyone else, I'd like to get a picture of the general you, of how you came into the world. What was your family structure? Where did you sit in the world? Your school years, really.
Yeah.
How was that for you?
So I was born in Melbourne to my mum, and at that stage my father wasn't involved in those early years of my life. So we my childhood went between sort of Geelong, Melbourne and Williamstown.
Williamstown, the view across to Melbourne, the great horizon.
Yeah, I did my first couple of years of primary school in Williamstown.
Beautiful.
So I spent a lot of time on the back of Mum's English rally bike, cruising around Melbourne, Geelong and Williamstown. That was my mode of transport because Mum never drove. So that was the beginning of having conversations and probably my first experience of getting to know my mum, the fact that she, would be in her kilt on her rally bike with 2 saddlebags full of documents going into the city from Geelong. She'd ride her bike to the train station and drop me off at daycare. And that was kind of the beginning of always moving. And being quite physical growing up, walking everywhere. And at the time I was like, why doesn't my mum have a car? But now looking back, I feel very lucky that
ahead of her time.
She was always ahead of her time.
It's very trendy now to go everywhere on a bike.
She's always a bit of a fashionista. Like I remember being on the Red Rattler and Mum in green stockings and everyone's staring at her. I was like, why are you looking at my mum? She's sort of before her trends with everything.
And what was she heading into Melbourne to do?
So she was a writer from a very young age, but she did spend some time at the Age in Melbourne and was involved with Accent and then some different parts of the Age in Melbourne. So she was sort of at the start of the Age Good Food Guide. So I have some fond memories of going around being a food critic at 10 or something and, not knowing where she was from and then saying swap plates. And she's like, they're going to pay for this as well because we would never, we single parent, we didn't have lots of money. So, going out back then was, there weren't as many restaurants. It was the beginning of, we lived in Carlton for a little bit. So, that was kind of the place to go and have a real bowl of pasta and learn how to use the fork and the spoon or whatever they recommended at the time and gelatis. So that was the beginning of my my life, if that makes sense. And so for me it was always about harvesting food with my mum. So she always had a Jeep and we spent a lot of time going to the Vic markets. At the time, I didn't realise why all the Italian men were so friendly to Mum because Mum's really pretty. So she doesn't even know it. So, I always wondered why, they'd offer her the extra apple or something when they were yelling out.
They wouldn't have liked to have thought she was doing the whole thing by herself. They would think she need protecting.
So at a
Yeah.
young age, I feel lucky. I started to understand food, and that was a big part of our life. And food and movement, without knowing, I learned at a young age to self-regulate with movement, and Mum did that as well. And we've talked about this in my adult life, that being a single parent was really hard for her, and the way she coped with that was to look after her own mental health by eating well and walking and riding her rally bike, which, funnily enough, I had restored for Mum about 5 years ago, because they're no longer made. Everything's made in
the same bike.
The original bike that she
Wow.
rode me around in. And then in
That's a bit
typical
special.
Mum fashion in Geelong, she said it's too dangerous to ride on the roads now. It's so busy. So she walked from like South Geelong to the other side. She's still a walker. Like, she rings me up now and says, "Oh, I've just done 15 Ks on foot." She's
Wow.
76. So
That's pretty inspiring, isn't it?
yeah, it just shows you keep moving
Yeah.
and carry shopping on your back the whole of your life. Well, she's got guns.
She
calls them
does.
her shopping guns.
Yeah, well, and you
So-
mentioned something that your dad wasn't around. So
No.
how was that for your mum? Was that a trauma for her, or was it all
Yeah.
straightforward?
It was. And I think the series, we have such an array of people coming onto our human experience, and there's this, a part of it that I hadn't kind of thought of until doing this. And, our human experience is learning for Claire and I as well. And not having my father's name on my birth certificate actually opened up something quite raw in me. And I've known that, but it's something that is more common than I ever thought of. And it wasn't until I went into my adult life and, was going for my learner's permit and really saw my birth certificate. Because prior to that, I kind of didn't really look at my birth certificate.
No.
So it is something that is quite emotional for me in a sense, because Mum was Mum and Dad. And it's a shame she can't fill that other box with her name again.
Yeah.
But I do have a father, and later in my life I did actually form a relationship with him to a degree, and met a number of half siblings. So same father, different mum, by a few different mothers. So that in itself.
Oh, really? He collected mothers.
He did.
And there's a few.
Pardon me, I
There's a
coughed
few.
as I said that. Yeah, so that in itself, I first met my father at 12. He came to Geelong and took me out for lunch with a friend, and talked about himself. Really didn't ask too much about me. But at that time, that was enough to sort of visualise who my dad was and work out kind of, I always wondered what he looked like. And then it sort of left me feeling, oh, that's all I really wanted to know right now. And at 12, a bit hormonal, but filled that void to a degree.
Yeah.
And then went into sort of teen years and 16, and then it was like, I want to go and live with my dad. And then Mum popped me on a ferry from Queenscliff, and he was on the other side of the peninsula, and off I went. So I did spend some time with him at 16.
Yeah.
And with my siblings. And of course, when I arrived, sadly enough, at that time, he'd said I had a younger brother, and he didn't want him to know that I was his sister. So I was told that I couldn't say that I was related. I was a family friend.
Oh, wow.
So adult decisions always have effects on children. So, yeah, I suppose looking back, I suppose that was my human experience, and that's always why I suppose in my life I've had compassion for people on their own.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and it comes up a few times in the podcast as
It
well.
does.
Other people having similar experiences, and
it does.
Yeah, and I think that we talked about that. I call it single from zero.
Single from zero.
So many women have that baby without the
Yeah.
man at the time of birthing.
And at that time too, Mum was quite involved with friends at the beginning of the sole parent pension. So the sole parent pension was designed for women that had been abandoned. So someone that had been potentially lost at war or passed away. So I feel like growing up that we were lucky to have that at that time. And I suppose here we are in the 2021 going on to 22.
Yep.
That, it has changed in lots of ways, our systems, if you like to call it, because not every birth is, this is probably a complex conversation, but children don't always come into this planet not knowing that they're not going to have two parents, and that has an effect. And people make decisions to have children, and I respect that, but coming from a person that only had one parent, knowing how hard it was from a child's view and now a child that's become an adult, I have quite a strong opinion on that. And that's because it is really hard, so it was the making of me.
Just wait. Hang on, say that again. Making of me.
It was the making of me.
Yeah.
They say, and Mum and I talk regularly about this, those hard times, I used to say to her, I love chicken wings and rice, Mum. And we talk about it now. It's because chicken wings are $1.99 a kilo. So it makes you value things. I don't waste things, or, I'm very mindful of, how much I buy and then using up everything in the fridge, because, we have so much food all around us in Australia, in our country. We're very blessed, and so much gets thrown out. So
when I think of what my mum did with mince was our
thing.
Our $2 a kilo meal.
Whatever now it's like, who knows? It's super expensive now, isn't it, Vince?
So that's a really interesting, because your mum was at the forefront then of single parents' pensions. So that
a turning point in Australia really, because when women were, if they were left alone, for them to find income was really hard, if you had young children and a partner left. And so there was a structure put in by the government to be able to have children and women looked after. So that was a turning point in our country.
Would have been about the time you were a child, actually.
It was, I was born in 76.
Yeah, wow.
So,
Okay, and so you've gone on, you've just revealed your age now, so we all know how old she is, but that's a part of her remarkableness. I don't know if that's a word.
We'll make it a word.
We'll make it a word. But, you are remarkable in what you've been through, and we'll find out a bit more about some of that journey.
Yeah.
So children, how does that factor in your life?
So unfortunately, I wasn't able to have children. So without playing my own violin, I like to sort of say it like that, because I can talk about it now. For many years it was quite raw for me. So 9 years of fertility treatment and trying to have a child or multiple children. I left it till my 30s to try for children, which I didn't think was too late, really. So I had very difficult times in that area and wasn't able to have children, sadly. So Anna, being Anna, thought, well, there's other ways to mother children. So I did foster.
Yes.
Out in northern New South Wales, in Moree, and in community. So I helped foster parents to relieve them, and also had some children that stayed a little longer with me. Sadly, that ended with a bit of trauma. I was fostered to adopt a little baby, and in a good way and not so good way, the style that it sort of played out with. I did have a 4-month-old baby girl with me, and was on the verge of having a baby shower with her, with all my family visiting, and the department found somebody, but they thought that they would make it sharp and swift and have her removed. So they've now apologised, and that's sort of been through a legal sort of avenue, because the child was put in distress, sadly.
Yeah.
So, that's my story. And people sort of say to me, oh, you dust it off and you kept going, when I had some pretty hard times in that area, and I had some beautiful children enter my home that I got to spend some time with and teach to swim and introduce them to foods that they hadn't had, and I always felt a lot of compassion and I feel very lucky that I was able to do that for a time in my life. So
and significant adults in children's lives never leave them.
No,
their
not
memory
at all.
Of that. Yeah.
The sad thing is, though, in New South Wales, there's 22,000 children in out-of-home care, and when you have children come in and out as even a respite carer, there are things in place where you can't ask departments if they're okay, or it's all very private. I understand that to a degree, but like you just said, that whole having significant adults, strong adults in a child's life, and knowing that they're not being abandoned.
Yeah.
Because abandonment in your life can affect you in many ways, which has me, and I understand that as a mature woman now. But as children don't understand. So they'll have memories of adults coming in and out, but they don't know why.
Yeah.
So
true.
Yeah, so that's something that I suppose have with my fertility journey, wanting to then looked at adoption within Australia, and that also is very difficult to adopt within Australia.
Really?
Considering we have so many out-of-home children in care, just like I just gave stats on New South Wales, but if you looked at the country as a whole, so that's a hot topic, and there's lots of opinions on that. But ultimately, there are a lot of couples and individuals that would love to adopt and give stability to a child that potentially couldn't have their own, but it's been made quite difficult with the way that Australia is set up at the moment with adoption. So hopefully in the future that will change.
Well, yeah, big topic, as you say. And so certainly in the podcast with some of the different guests that you will be bringing on over the next few years, that some of those topics will be covered. But you touched on something there that you moved from Geelong.
Yes.
And you went regional New South Wales.
I did.
How did you get there, and what did you do?
I know. It's funny. Majority of mum's side of the family are quite, we'll say, intellectual.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm actually dyslexic. So I was the hands-on girl that would be putting the nail in the wall in the home and changing. I had a lot of freedom as a child to cook and move every piece of furniture around. So that sort of paved an open pathway, I believe, into having confidence to get out and do things with my hands, because mum encouraged me. It was always very sporty. Yeah. So I was in surf clubs, surfboat rowing, tennis, netball, didn't stop. Mum used to just try and wear me out so she could read a book, really, and read huge newspapers so I could skid across them.
Yeah.
I actually moved away and went nannying, and I read an advert in the Geelong Advertiser, and I took off at 21 to Never Tire, which is past Dubbo. Warren, Never tire.
Isn't that ironic?
I know. I actually never thought of it like that. Yeah, it's actually funny. I've been called Energizer Bunny.
Yeah.
So town of 101, I think, on a 25,000 acre property they were doing multiple things. They had sheep and broadacre. So went out there, and that's when life sort of I began my own journey and had my wings on. So headed out there, did some nannying for a while, did some bar work because there was better money in bar work, and then thought, I discovered the Land newspaper. So I'm like, I think I want to travel around Australia. And back then, like, no, poor mum. Yeah. I took off. No mobile phones.
Only
just ring her at a pub every now and then.
Can imagine now, can't you?
I know. So took off, went up and did the cotton harvest, and went up and headed up into Queensland and saw some pretty interesting country and probably learned a lot about cotton. I don't really know if I really wanted to learn all that much, but anyway, I learned a lot. And I ended up in a country town called Moree, which is near the Queensland border, and I never left for 18 years.
Wow. And you must have had some journey while you were there.
I sure did. I sure did.
Fell in love, I'm going to expect.
Fell in love, yes, fell in love. fell in love with community, met some of the most incredible people I've ever met in my life there. It's like I was such a coastal girl, but what kept me in Moree was the artesian water, because they've got the beautiful underground water source there.
Yes.
I think that's how I was able to stay there that long.
Yeah.
Learn about Australia. Like, I hadn't really had much to do with any Aboriginal people at all, being in Geelong, in Newtown, where a lot of us had blonde hair and blue eyes. So I was always really interested in knowing people, and I've always been community orientated to a degree. And it just became even more important living in a small country town of 10,000. So career-wise, I did lots of different jobs. I'd always just been a worker. You know, I'd always put my hand, if I had to clean a house, work throughout a harvest, you know, I was always having a go. So I ended up, through lots of casual and seasonal work, I ended up working in the convenience and petrol industry.
Oh, yeah.
So at 30, I became an owner of 2 franchise businesses and ended up with 32 staff.
Wow.
So
no, that didn't happen overnight.
It did not happen
No,
overnight. I had to go. I entered Moree with a swag and a bag.
Wow.
So that was a very interesting part of my life. P.S. Don't buy a franchise.
And certainly not petrol stations.
And certainly
days.
not petrol.
No.
But ended up on the franchise board for New South Wales as well. So got a really quick shock into the world of business, and worked out what I did and didn't want to do in life. But they were good lessons.
Yep.
Which then moved along into other business ventures so that fertility journey was done throughout that whole thing. So I was pretty messed up. Let's be honest.
Okay, we'll touch on the fertility. That comes in again, doesn't it?
It does,
later.
yeah.
But in that time, you were saying your relationship with the First Nation community of that. How did that play out? Like, being a newbie to the country town, you would have had to...
Yeah, well, it took me some time to earn trust.
Yeah.
And that came with just being, treating everyone equally. And it was funny because coming from, I had no agenda, I had no opinion, and I've been brought up to just treat everyone equally. So I didn't have, I had no judgment. So I would look at everyone as an equal. So for me, country towns can be very racist, and that was a shock to me because I'd actually never seen that before.
Yep.
So I remember, and it was interesting, being at a town hall meeting, and it was over a property development, and there was a lady stood up, and we were talking about bringing more business to Moree, and a lady said, now, when you employ someone and it doesn't work out, if you employ an Aboriginal person, do you say, I'm not employing an Aboriginal person ever again because it didn't work out? Do you say that about a white person? And I was she was very open, and she ran an Aboriginal employment strategy. And for me, that was very momentous for me as an employer of many people. I always employed, people. I'd like to say it. So
people
I learned,
with the right skills. That's right.
And people that needed to go as well. So I learned a lot about things that I didn't know about living on country. What's a totem? I remember having that conversation with an elder, and they're like, it's the goanna, Anna. And I was like, really? I didn't know that. I've lived here 10 years. And I remember walking into, at that stage, I had sold shops, and then we were had a butcher shop in Delhi, walked into a team of butchers and said, what's the totem? And there was many, many local men in there, and no one knew. And I was so shocked. I'm like, you boys have lived here all your life. So it's all about conversation.
Yeah.
And And so that was like a mission I went on, to just tell everyone what our totem was. And I took it as our totem, not your totem. I took it as our totem, as our community.
As the region and the town,
Yeah, and it was really important. So there are all lessons on stories and how the art of conversation is so important.
Yep.
And that's part of the reason why storytelling and this podcast on our human experience is so important.
Yes, well, I think I just was really impressed with the amount of times we've had the conversation about it too, because perception can often be, they take one look at us and see people take a look and box you and think blonde, blue-eyed.
Absolutely.
Must be well-to-do. It could even associate your mother's academia with you,
Absolutely.
And that must have been hard during school as well.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I grew up in Housing Commission. So for me, in my late 20s, bought my first home for $110,000 in Moree. That for me was just massive, and it's so hard now too, and this is totally going off track as I do, but for young people to get into a home now, for people, unless you've come from money, and having a leg up or having to live with family for 10 years to save for a deposit, it's just become so difficult.
Very
but
hard.
Again, it's a story, isn't it, about putting your mind to something and bettering yourself to a degree. But I think at 45, after having a very traumatic fertility experience, which was unsuccessful, but also IVF drugs have a massive side effect, which is a conversation that needs to probably be said.
Yes.
It can bring on menopause and perimenopausal, so prior to menopause. So that affects you emotionally and physically. So unintended, that had that effect on me as a woman in my 30s, unknowingly. So through that time, I ate my way through life, and had always struggled with my weight to a degree. So the fertility probably accelerated it, and I ended up at my heaviest probably being 160 kilos.
Wow. Now that, for those who are watching as opposed to listening, hard to believe. So this is the moment. So in our Human Experience podcast, everyone seems to have a moment, like a turning point or some sort of adversity they go through that for whatever reason, or perhaps it's from that early years. And I was hearing about your relationship with food and movement, and your mum being sounds empowering.
Yeah.
I believe her name's Jan. So hi to Jan. We love you, Jan. And so you're now saying that your relationship with food was used as a comfort during this very trauma. So what happened that you got to 160 kilos and something must have switched, because you're not 160 kilos
No,
now.
I'm not. So I like to say that I had a lot of mother love to a degree with food. We came together with food at home, and I learnt to cook at a young age, and I left home, and my eating habits changed. I still knew good food, but I just ate way too much. And it just kept gaining. Like, I'd lose a bit, put some on, lose a bit more, put more on, knew that I was struggling, and I had an absolute obsession with chocolate. Yeah. I could inhale that stuff.
Any particular brand?
Yeah, definitely hazelnut, Cadbury.
Yeah, Cadbury, there you go.
Anything nuts coated in chocolate. So, but I had no off switch. I never felt full, and it made me feel better in the moment. So for me, turning 40, I was so uncomfortable in myself. I had bad back problems. I had lots of side effects. Like, when you're overweight, you have side effects. For me, I had my gallbladder out in my late 20s, and then suffered back problems debilitating back problems.
Yeah.
So
you had a real health crisis there. That would
absolutely. And I was getting these migraines of the stomach. I was not in a good place. So at that time, I was always working hard, and I saw an advert for The Biggest Loser. And, of course, I immediately...
You're in Moree.
In Moree.
In a petrol station.
No, so no fuel then. At that stage, I was an apprentice butcher.
Okay. That in.
Yeah.
Butcher, okay.
So we had the butcher shop. So my previous partner we had gone into business together, and funnily enough, my father was a butcher.
Yeah, right.
And my half brother also a butcher. So it was genetically in there. So I was working a very manual job in a male-dominated industry, and I walked into the shop and said, I am applying for The Biggest Loser, and they all laughed.
Yeah, of course.
And so that night I went around to a friend's and did a tape of 2 minutes of me saying why I wanted to be on The Biggest Loser, and filled out application form. And within 24 hours I had a contact from production, and it happened very quickly. I then was flown to Sydney and was interviewed again by a panel of executives and producers. And very quickly again, I was then rushed to hospital to have an absolute mass of tests, which is fascinating, really.
Yeah.
And then again, I was accepted as a contestant on The Biggest Loser. I'm losing track of years, nearly 5 years ago.
Wow.
Life-changing for me.
And how much time would you have had to set aside for this process?
So filming from memory was over 4 months, 3 months commitment, but it was a 12-month contract. And I said to myself, I need time for me. It was probably the first time in my life I'd said I need time out.
So a pretty extreme way to get a
holiday.
It
was. Get in your undies and stand in front of the country.
Oh, my gosh.
At a very uncomfortable way.
Wow.
Yeah, the most confronting.
Picturing that, wow.
Yeah, it was truly the most confronting thing I've ever done.
Yeah.
To feel so, but be so exposed. But in my mind, I said to myself, there was no turning back. Yeah. I have to do this. And I, unfortunately, in the world of reality TV, got eliminated early.
Yeah, right.
So I then made a decision right there and then, and I was meant to fly back to Moree, and I said, no, I want to go to Jan in Geelong and hide there. So I did that for part of my Biggest Loser experience, went into kind of hiding, and I just went for it.
Continued your weight loss? I
continued my weight loss out of the house while filming was continuing, and I changed my life mentally and physically.
Did they continue to support you?
They did.
Wow.
So I was, I had got a trainer in Geelong, Chris Bradford, who is an Australian.
We get to meet Chris.
He's very visually pleasing.
Yes.
But an absolute weapon of a man, and he got me in that ring, and I got rid of some stuff, which was really good for me on a mental and physical level.
Thanks, Chris, for that.
That's
amazing.
And then, luckily enough, we had a great nutrition specialist that I could speak to regularly, and also some psychology, which was so important because there was a reason I was overweight. So I know this for you and I is a sensitive topic too, so I want to kind of say that. And I'm very mindful of people's feelings when it comes to weight and everyone's individual story. And like now, when someone hasn't met me before, they never know I was huge. I was a big woman.
You're pretty easy to Google, and then you'll see the before and after shots, and they're pretty striking. The difference is huge.
Oh, I went from a 22 to a size 8, which I'm not a size 8 at the moment, but I've had my skin removed. That's been a journey in itself. And actually, weirdly enough, body dealing with, the balance of a person that has fat cells, that is inclined to put on weight and has had a really unhealthy relationship with food. So for me, it's getting the balance right to live a healthy, fit, comfortable life forever. It's not a crash diet. So there's been a lot of learning along the way, and I've loved helping other people also, doing some guest speaking and running some camps and doing bits and pieces to basically support people. You know, that's the most important thing. I think that everyone has a different story with their weight. I mean, I've had people come to me that can't gain weight.
I was just going to say, again, perception. Just because you look at someone and you see an overweight person, you can't assume that story is to do with excess or bad eating.
No, not at all. Not at all. And it's funny you say that, because I was never a lazy person. I was always on the go. Yeah. I mean, you're very similar. Yeah. You never stop. But there's just these switches that we all have in ourselves. And for me, I remember having a DEXA scan on The Biggest Loser, and it showed all my fat on my body. And Shannon looked at me and the doctor, and they said, "You are the worst overweight person." And why? Is because you don't stop and your heart is working overtime. And you could have a heart attack, Anna. You're not couch surfing. You're running around lifting bodies of meat. That sounds really bad. Tubs of sausages.
Remembering you were a butcher, I remembered. Yeah.
And you know, was that girl that would renovate and never stop, but carting around so much weight. And I remember the fog lifting at different times, and me having realizations about my physical self, where I had never had that before. And I remember even at the gym, people staring at me and saying to a couple of trainers, "What are they looking at?" And the boys were like, "They're checking you out." And I was like, I'd never had that.
Wow.
You know, just things like that. Not that that was really important, but it was just like people started to perceive, like I could walk into a clothes shop and no one would ever talk to me. Yeah. Then all of a sudden I walked into a clothes shop and everyone wanted to talk to me.
Yeah, and they want to offer you, make sure you're picking the right dress. Got so many choices.
Yeah, and that, like I remember the first time I bought anything off the rack.
Yeah.
You know, because I got too big to fit into Miller's clothes. And then, so that was cutting my options short. So then I used to wear stretchy things. So then all of a sudden I could walk into a department store. When I got home from The Biggest Loser, I threw out 100 pairs of leggings and all my undies. It was so awesome.
Oh, yeah, that would have been quite amazing, because you went away, then you hid away. And then you would have come back transformed.
I was.
Oh my gosh, how did that go? Walking down
the
street.
Airport, yeah. Oh, it was interesting, because at that stage we'd just like filming time was different to reality time, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I was like a finished product that couldn't be seen, luckily in a country town. But so people were like, you know, she's won it, she's done this.
Oh, because they wouldn't have realised that you'd been eliminated. You'd have to keep all that secret.
Yeah, so I couldn't
think you'd won it. Yeah. So you're a winner in our books anyway.
Well, I was the winner that didn't win The Biggest Loser. That was
so did you lose the most amount of
I did, yeah.
From outside of the show. That's not a good advert.
I know. And it was amazing, because I got all these magazine contracts and had fashion shoots on the beach and was on, you know, and I had all this attention to a degree of that I didn't expect, and I got treated like a princess, and it was absolutely a wonderful time in my life. And I worked so goddamn hard and trained like a demon, but not just that, let go of a lot of stuff and formed a healthy relationship with food. And that's been the key to me keeping the weight off.
And for us now, going into this chapter, so you've ended up in Far North Queensland.
I have.
You've ended up with hanging out with Claire. So Claire Tierney, who's the other half of our Human Experience host. And how did that come about? Like, how did you transport out of?
I know. It's so I met Claire through a mutual friend, and luckily enough, I was able to come to North Queensland as a guest speaker at a gym in Cairns. Oh, yes. So that was my first experience into North Queensland, speaking about my Biggest Loser journey. And I met Claire face to face, like I'd sort of in the world of social media, I'd met her through like-minded friends, and we met face to face when I travelled here then, and then we as we know, Claire is very talented in production and has some amazing skills. Yeah,
absolutely.
So she at that time actually helped me formulate a couple of camps and worked in the background because I'm dyslexic. I struggle with the back end of paperwork with things. I've always managed, but I find the right people. And Claire's definitely that.
That's the way to do it.
Yeah. And we formed a friendship. And at that time in my life as well, I was having change in my life on a personal level with a husband that I was married to for quite some time. And we parted ways. It wasn't healthy for me. And I moved away. So for me, I loved Moree. So saying goodbye was very hard.
Yeah.
But I fell in love with North Queensland, and Claire opened the door for me to come and stay with her.
Yeah.
So she created a safe space to live, which I'm forever grateful for. Yeah. And we formed this, I suppose, I'm like this loyal, indebted friend that says, you helped me at a time and I'm never going to forget that. And I'm always going to help you. And we're such opposites. Like I pick her up and throw in the car and, you know, I'm physically a very strong woman. And I think the balance is quite funny at times.
Now, for the listeners who have, or those that have not seen the podcast,
really
no, that didn't sound. Sounded a bit like the butcher experience.
It did.
So Claire does need assistance to get into the car, and so you can learn her story.
So I throw her in every now and
then.
So
literally, she does need your physical strength, but also you're motivated, like constantly looking for the next thing and doing things. So Far North Queensland would suit you around that outdoor lifestyle. Yeah,
it's a beautiful place, and I mean the food up here again.
Food
is a massive draw card. Yeah. We have the most incredible produce from the tablelands.
So now you're here in Far North Queensland. And let's cut forward because there's a lot of chapters of your book that are now being closed. So let's just talk again about Anna today. Yeah. What's your passions today that keep you going, that inspire you?
I suppose me being me, there's usually a few things on the go. And at the moment, one of my passions, obviously, is our human experience and why that's been formulated, and Claire and I have come together to create that. So one thing I do recognise in life is having purpose, and seeing Claire being such an amazingly creative woman who was, as we both know, you know, she did karate. She was a person that would run around on stage and be organising everything. So for her to then not be able to move freely like we can, she as my friend and someone I've cared for, I could see really quickly that she needed purpose to be able to keep, you know, moving and being on the planet and being active, because, you know, she's a person that doesn't want to lay down and give into the MS. She wants to, you know, find the best thing she can do for herself to improve her health physically and mentally. So we recognise so many times through conversation together that, you know, so many people have incredible stories that can uplift, or just that one conversation or listening to someone that can change your life. So together with our individual stories, we thought that storytelling was so important for not just ourselves, but for our country. And COVID really brought that to light even more so than ever. So this is sort of the conversation began. I mean, and how many people have conversations about I should and we could, but actually go ahead and do it. And we just keep plodding away, talking about it and making things happen. And the guests that we speak to, you know, from all walks of life, all have the most incredible stories. And I mean, this is where podcasts and having this incredible studio in
Wow,
Babinda.
wasn't that a pure chance
I know,
to
and
have a studio
and
that
meeting
you can come to?
yourself.
Yeah.
Things just formulate.
Yeah.
And I suppose it's just having a crack, but also giving people the opportunity to share their story as well in this type of format. It's like recording history.
It is an oral history, and just to fill in the gap around that too, because we didn't set this studio up with just microphones to record. Arts Nexus is a community cultural development agency, and I particularly believe in the 17 sustainability goals of the United Nations, and one of those is you have a right to share your story. Your cultural and creative expression is actually a human right, and it is something that they can take away from you when they want to dissolve a community or make sure that they are not empowered, and that's the first thing they'll erode is your history, your stories, and certainly your cultural expression. So it's just our little thing that we can do in our backyard here in Babinda Village. And I certainly think your particular point of view, Anna, even alongside with Claire's, and we get to hear Claire's story as well, so you can find that podcast. But Anna, your story to have gone from single mum, housing commission, through Outback Australia, finding your own path, still, and I can testify to how you much respect you talk about your mother and what she's done for you and your connection with her. That I think that when my mum too, and the distance does. You can't just, especially these days with COVID, you can't just pop on the plane or go down the road for a cuppa, and that is a real challenge.
Definitely.
They don't leave our minds.
Long.
No,
they don't.
Every time I pick up something, my mother wouldn't do that. I should make my white sauce like this and not like that, or whatever it is,
I'm looking forward to sharing a meal with Mum, very soon. And I think that the way the future now is through this kind of conversation with this type of technology, we can be closer together as a community but be so far apart. So
find a new tribe, even just because you're geographically located close to someone, like your neighbour over the fence, doesn't make you any more compatible as friends or people you work with. That's a bigger challenge even. Definitely. So I've loved getting to know you over this time, and we'll always consider you too as a friend and an inspiration. I think that's a really amazing thing. So
thank you. There's a lot coming with the next chapter. With supporting, I have actually made some decisions, and this is through the process of our human experience, listening to other people's stories as like, what do I really want to do with my life? We're on this amazing planet, and I want to help people and help create a platform for discussion and conversation. And for me, my big passion is helping support people with their physical and their weight journey, if they have difficulty, because there are a lot of people out there on their own that don't have the family support or just need to talk to someone that can relate. So watch that space.
Watch this space indeed. Well, thank you very much, Anna, for taking the time to share and really talk through some of those key challenges that you've had. So amazing story.
Made me stronger.
Thank you. And thank you for our human experience, bringing that together.
To life.
Pod binge
now.
Pod binge now, your human experience reflected back to you. So lovely. Thank you again.
Thanks, Melissa.
No worries, bye.
Thank you for listening to Our Human Experience. You can follow us on social media on Instagram and Facebook, ourhumanexperience.com.au.
Listen to Our Human Experience,
where you can pod binge anytime you like.
See you next time.
Bye.
If you have found this episode to cause you some distress, please reach out to a friend or call Lifeline anytime on 131114. 131114. Take care.